Hello and welcome to the channel. My name's Tarana Ali and today we're going to look at some techniques we can all apply to better remember the things that we read. So let's break this down into 5 main key points, with point number 1 being to pay attention to what you're reading. So you want to take your time with reading the material and get rid of any sort of distractions that you may have, so you're truly able to deeply focus and internalize the concepts. If you're a speed reader, you might want to slow down a bit, especially in the areas that requires you to focus, so you're able to think and reflect on what you just read. Now, moving on to point number 2, which is don't try to memorize the text. Memorization is one of the least effective learning strategies you can apply, and this is because when you're memorizing something, you're storing the information in your short-term memory, and it's not sustainable if you want to store the information in your long-term memory. Now, the ideal way to tap into our memory reserves is to follow the unconventional route to learning via spaced repetition and active recall, which I've discussed more thoroughly in my previous video. Links will be down below. Now, to briefly state these strategies, firstly we have the active recall, which is basically recalling or remembering facts from our brain, which helps strengthen the connections and reconsolidate the memory. And secondly, we have the spaced repetition, which is basically the opposite of cramming studies, where we space out our review of the lessons over a period of time. Okay, now let's go back and look at point number 3, which is to make questions while you're reading the text. So you want to ask yourself questions that you may have as you're reading the material and write them down so you can come back to it later and answer them for yourself. And this is actually a great indicator of your level of understanding of the text. So now you can tell for yourself what you really know and don't know. Now, moving on to key point number 4, which is to make a mental picture of the thing that you'd like to remember. Now, if you're someone who has a photographic memory, you want to create this mental picture or scenario of the thing that you'd like to remember and add elements like your own reaction to it, so you're able to make a stronger impression in your brain. But if you happen to be more receptive to sound than visuals, try reading the text out loud. And now moving on to the final point number 5, which is to share what you've learned with others. This sort of falls under the Feynman technique, which is basically to learn something in a manner that you're able to explain it to a 5-year-old. So you want to learn the concept first to be able to teach it and break it down into a smaller set of things, so you're able to organize and simplify your explanation. And so eventually, as you're teaching, you'll be able to identify and fill in the gaps that you may have as you revisit and reflect upon it. Okay, now I want to quickly add an additional point in here, which is something that I do and it has worked for me, and that is to highlight the keywords as I'm reading a book, so I can come back to it on a later date and think and reflect as to why I had highlighted the thing. Okay, now if you're interested in a more in-depth video about how to remember what you've learned, you might want to check out my previous video, which will be linked down below or will be somewhere here on the screen, hopefully. Make sure to check that out and let me know what you think. So if you've come this far, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you spending this time with me, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!